After a long hiatus, we are back again with another edition of the Red, White, and Ruthless. Today, we're going to talk about a few things. Number one, we're going to talk about the Gabe Bell Stevenson signing for the Buffalo Bills, as well as a few other topics. We'll talk about that and more right after we hit the intro. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another edition of the Red, White, and Ruthless. Today, for our June 1st edition of the Red, White, and Ruthless, I'm joined here by Stacy's mom, as well as my partner in crime, as always, Mr. Shawn Kula. Shawn, how you doing, buddy?
Doing okay. How are you doing?
Cannot complain, man. It's another day, another dollar. You know how it is, as always. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Nickel City Mafia, as well as click the notification bell to be notified when we are going live for the Red, White, and Ruthless show. You can find all that information, as well as other information, in our description below, as well as our Discord channel as well. We're going live on Facebook as well as on YouTube today, and we are joined back again after a bit of a hiatus for us. We haven't been going live at our normal 8:30 start time, but we are going live again at this 8:30 start time. Don't forget that we will be doing this throughout the whole entire offseason from now on. We had a bit of a hiatus due to some personal issues, as well as some medical issues that I was going through. Luckily, I am okay. I had a bit of a medical scare in March where I ended up going to the hospital. And as you can see a little bit on me, I do have a little bit of facial injuries that happened, but I am back to normal. Glad to be back with you guys as well. We are going to be doing these shows, like I said, every Saturday, 8:30 p.m. until the start of the regular season, and then we will be moving the show more than likely to other times, depending on how the schedule is, because there are some games that will be played on Saturdays as well. But Shawn, before we begin the show today, I do want to send out my thoughts and prayers to you and your family, man. I know you guys are going through a lot lately with some personal issues that you are having off air. I don't want to get into those personal issues, but I do want to send my thoughts and prayers to you, man, and know that, you know, you're always here whenever, or I'm always here whenever you need somebody. So if you ever want to talk, man, you know, I'm always here. So just be aware of that.
Oh yeah, greatly appreciated. Thank you, man.
No worries, man. So I do want to get into a couple of things. Number one, we do have a new signing for the Buffalo Bills. We are going to talk about Gabe Bell Stevenson, who has not played an ounce of football in his life. He tried out for the Buffalo Bills a few days ago. First time he picked up cleats was at that tryout, but he is an Olympic gold medalist, as well as a pretty much a massive human being that can move around, as well as he can do backflips. So I do want to get to this clip real quick before we get into talking about him, but I want everybody to be aware of Gable Stevenson. So I'm going to play this clip real quick, and then we will talk about Gable Stevenson.
Gable play the game. I mean, who does that at 265?
So Stevenson is 6'1", 275 pounds. He's going to be playing defensive tackle for the Buffalo Bills. And this is the signing that I absolutely love. I don't know about you, Shawn. Our defensive line has been struggling a lot lately. And this is the move that reminds me so much of the size of Ed Oliver. He has a lot of wrestling background. He was with the NXT as well as WWE in the past. He did get released from his contract about a month ago from WWE, has tried out for a few teams in the NFL, and he decided to sign with the Buffalo Bills. I know a few other teams were interested in him, but he decided to go to the Buffalo Bills, probably because of Sean McDermott's background. He was a two-time NCAA champion in wrestling. So this is a move that I absolutely love. And I think that Sean McDermott's going to be able to get him into the ability to play football. But this is a move that, you talk about guys that are freak athletes, and this is a freak athlete. Remember, Bob Hayes was a wrestler as well, and he was the only player to ever win a Super Bowl being a wrestler. And this is just something that I absolutely love for the Buffalo Bills to be able to do, is get another player in there that can be disruptive and get to the quarterback. I don't know about you, Shawn, but how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's athletic, crazy, almost 300 pounds. He could do backflips, and he had a lot of air in that. So, it's impressive how athletic he is. Wrestling, it can translate to football, especially in the trenches. So I got a feeling, maybe in like 2 years, and that's the only problem with it is like, yeah, it's cool and, exciting, but it's not going to matter for us this year for sure. There's no way he's going to be able to make the team or make an impact even. But, on the practice squad, getting the reps, he might be able to mimic some really athletic, tough, physical defensive tackles. So, he might have a purpose in that sense, but as far as being on the field and making plays for the Buffalo Bills, if at all, it won't be for at least a couple seasons. That's why they gave him a 3-year deal. Got to learn the game. Yeah, he's athletic, but jumping in right for the high, from never playing to the highest level, it's gonna be a tough road for him. But definitely, I mean, don't hate it, but it's sucks having to wait for something.
Well, this is the move that, I mean, if you look back at what Buffalo has done in the offseason, and I will get to John Roberts' comment in just a second as well. I see you out there in the chat. Don't forget that you can put comments out in the chat. We will talk about what you guys are talking about as well. And don't forget also to click the like button as well as share button as well, and let your friends know about the Nickel City Mafia, because some people may not know about us as well. But let's talk about this move a little bit more. This is just like John Roberts saying here, where he says he'll probably start on the practice squad and he wants to add a little bit more weight. I completely agree with that. I think that this is the move that Sean McDermott and the Buffalo Bills are looking at, especially with some of the moves in the offseason where we've gone after guys that are a little bit more of projects. And these are moves that you look back to for a couple more years, and these could pay an impact on the roster. You look at the guy that we got in the draft that plays for the unit, or played rugby in the United Kingdom. And I think that these are two moves that Buffalo is saying, hey, listen, we tried it with a guy in Jason Peters a long time ago, and he wasn't even at his position as an offensive lineman. He was a tight end. We moved him to the offensive line, and he was able to block. Maybe this is the move that Buffalo says, listen, Jordan Mailata had a good career as a offensive lineman. He played rugby. Let's try it out. You got to take a chance every once in a while on a player that nobody's ever heard of, because there's players out there that are good freak athletes that can make an impact on the team.
Right.
So that very well is going to happen. And I think that these are two moves that we'll see in a couple of years where they're going to make a big impact on the team. And who knows, they could make the roster. You never know, especially with a guy that has a wrestling background. And if he can be disruptive and get to the quarterback, that's the biggest thing that we need to see, is a little bit more ability to get to the quarterback. Or maybe it's not the quarterback, maybe it's the running back and stuffing plays in the backfield for the Buffalo Bills in 2024.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But definitely, as far as athleticism goes, it's exciting. But I don't got any I have zero expectation until maybe year 2.
Hey, you never know. I mean, this could be a move, like I said, that the Bills are going to have to figure out. And then this is the guy that's going to take a little bit of growing. I mean, if you look at somebody that goes into a company and, you know, he has the tools, he has everything that he needs, but doesn't have the skills. That's what I'm looking at with Stevenson in the situation where it's a guy that has all the skills in every other category to be able to be successful, but he just doesn't have the ability and even the amount of time to be able to go into a job and say, hey, listen, you know, I can do it in my sleep. And that's where I think he's going to have to figure it out. And if he can figure it out on the field, he's a freak athlete off the field in other sports. And if he can figure it out on the field, then that's going to be the biggest thing for him. That's going to help him. But
for sure.
Shawn, let's talk about a few other categories that we're going to talk about today. This is one that I think is a good one to talk about, especially with free agency ending. We've talked about the draft so much, and we also talked about free agency quite a bit as well. And the next step is training camp, which is coming up. We just had OTAs for the Buffalo Bills. We saw a bunch of players come in. We were missing a few other ones, Brazil Douglas and a couple of other ones that didn't make it to OTAs. But we do have training camp coming up in a few weeks. That'll be at St. John Fisher for another year for the Buffalo Bills. Don't forget to go on the Buffalo Bills website to find out all the details on when the Bills will be having practices coming up. But what I wanted to talk about is the bubble watch. We have a ton of veterans that are on this roster. It's pretty much a veteran-savvy roster again this year. We have a ton of veterans as well as players that are on bubble watch that we have to worry about. And this is very early on in the process, but I wanted to talk about some of the players that are on the roster bubble that need to have a big training camp today, or not today, but later on in the offseason for the Buffalo Bills. And I wanted to go back and forth and just talk about some of these players. And people that are watching in the chat, don't forget to leave comments on players that we may have skipped or we may not have thought of, because you know, there's a lot of players that are on this roster. We have 91 right now that are on the roster. There's going to be some players that we're going to have to talk about that could be roster cuts for the Buffalo Bills. So, Shawn, I'm going to start it off with you. Who do you think is a player that's going to be a roster cut for the Bills?
I don't know about a cut, but a battle will probably be like Chase Claypool, MVS, and like Shavers. They're not necessarily all veterans for a long time, but they're, depending on how many receivers we keep, we might keep 6. So those 3 will basically be fighting for 2 spots, maybe 1 spot. So I think that could be like a little, you know, the wide receiver room for the 5th and 6th wide receiver could be pretty interesting.
Well, you also have to remember that the new kickoff rules for the NFL, the Bills may keep 7 guys on the roster just because of the new kickoff rules where you have to have 2 players back.
I think they should, but I guess they'll have to, maybe if all 3 of them do a great job, they will have no choice but to keep all 3, you know? Because
I don't think
even if you don't use all of them, you know, if you don't use all of them in the offense, like you mentioned, a guy like Claypool, you know, even if, for some reason, if you don't want to use him in the offense, you know, he's still fast and big and strong. He could do good on the return. Or a guy like Shavers, maybe he can just won't be worked in the offense at all, but could be worked on the special teams, like you were saying. So I think that could be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to get to this comment from John Robert real quick. He is giving us details on the offseason for the Buffalo Bills. July 24th at St. John's Fisher is when the report date is for the veteran players right now, which is a start date for the Buffalo Bills over there. It will be a couple days before that for the rookies, but the official start date is July 24th. So don't forget about that. Go on over to St. John Fisher. I've been there a couple times. It's a lot of fun to go there, especially when you get to see players up close and personal. It was a blast for me. I got to meet a few players back in the day for the Buffalo Bills: Fred Jackson, Stevie Johnson, Ryan Fitzpatrick. I remember back in those days. Ryan Lindell as well. Donald Jones, David Nelson I met as well. bunch of players that I met that were a bunch of fun, as well as Sammy Watkins. I mean, super cool guy. And Andre Reed was there 1 year too. But I mean, just a lot of fun to go there and be out in the sun and great weather in New York, especially in the summertime. So going over to St. John Fisher in Pittsburgh, New York, enjoy the football weather and go root on the Buffalo Bills and practice as well. But Shawn, back to the roster battles and roster cuts that I believe the Bills could make. I'm going to throw one out there that nobody's really talking about lately, and this is the move that we saw earlier in the offseason that nobody even thought of could happen with Stephon Diggs getting traded from the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to throw out Von Miller as a name, and I know a lot of Bills Mafia may not like that, so forgive me for saying this, guys. I'm going to say it right now. This is a player that I do not want the Bills to get rid of. I think that he's going to make an impact, but you have to also remember the age, number one, as well as injury history for Von Miller coming off of 2 ACL injuries, as well as what he did last year. He had 0 sacks last year, 3 tackles, didn't really make an impact, and the Bills can save over $8 million, about $8.8 million, if they decide to trade Von Miller before the start of the season, which is a significant number that they could use to get another player like Yannick Ngakoue or a few other players that they could find on the active market. There's a few veteran players that we could go after, and we did have the money that we saved from Tre'Davious White, $10.2 million to be exact, that we saved for him. And we do have about $13-14 million right now. About $22 million would be great to get a player like Yannick Ngakoue or somebody of his caliber to help out the Buffalo Bills in 2024. But if Vaughn is struggling in training camp and isn't getting to the pass rusher, I don't think it's a bad idea to get rid of all these contracts for the Buffalo Bills that are just ones that are going to be dead cap in the next couple of years. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's that definitely would be interesting. It's not impossible. Like I said, it might be interesting just because I don't know if they do it only because we don't have a lot of proven talent at that position. But like you said, if they feel like that's something they can move on from, then I wouldn't be opposed to it. Like I said, I want to get off his. He could get 20 sacks this year, and I want him. I don't want him back on the team next year. So yeah, I wouldn't be angry about it, I guess. But keep him with that position as far as a possible cut. If we say it's Von Miller, Rousseau, Epinesa, and Solomon, I guess just throw him in there at 4. If we keep 5. Casey Toohill and Dwayne Smoot will be battling for that 5th spot, and Cameron Klein too. So basically, you're going to have 3 defensive ends fighting for 1 spot. So I think that's going to be really awesome. Well, technically you got to say Solomon too because he's not guaranteed a roster spot. So you basically got 4 guys fighting for two spots. Because I don't think we'll keep 6. I think we'll keep 5 and then 5 D tackles. So I think between those 4 guys fighting for the 2 spots, I think it's a good thing to have. Having a lot of competition and guys pushing each other. And like I said, if we keep if we don't move on from Von, save some money, and you got those 3 locks and Epinesa, Rousseau, and Von, then that could be really awesome. Like I said, I don't think Toohill and Smoot and Klein are like game changers or anything, but competition's always good, and I'm glad we have it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think this is a roster that if Buffalo wants to start the year off with some of their younger guys like Greg Rousseau or Casey Toohill, who are a little bit younger than number one, obviously being Von Miller. But if they want to start off with Rousseau and especially AJ Epinesa, who's been playing pretty well, I don't blame them for deciding on parting ways with Von Miller. I think that that's a strategy that Buffalo can make, and you could go with some of these younger guys in Cameron Klein as well as Javon Sullivan and as well as maybe going after a guy on the open market that we could sign that can make an impact as well and have a good rotation, because that's the one thing that Buffalo is going to do is they're going to rotate defensive ends quite a bit. I think that they're going to go with 5 guys. I think that really strongly that the Bills could make a roster decision and get rid of Von Miller's contract. Now, I know by far that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott love Von Miller, but this is a decision. This is a business. You have to decide on what's best for the team, and that's the hard things that we're going to have to deal with. Who would have thought that Stephon Diggs would be out of Buffalo, especially after how he did last season? I didn't think that it was going to happen this year. I thought maybe one more year and that's it. But
Same.
We had a ton of players that we got rid of this offseason. We are moving on from them, getting rid of dead contracts and trying to get back to a roster that we can build up again. And I don't blame Brandon Beane for deciding on that this year, because it's going to happen eventually. You got to do it. So why not do it now? You know, you look at Tre'Davious White, you look at Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, who is a free agent, but you look at some of these players that are veterans that the Bills are going to be missing, and you look at all the other players that we lost in Stephon Diggs. You look at other players as well, and Mitch Morse. And this roster is full of a lot of talent and veteran players, but their contracts were so big that we're just losing dead cap, and that's the biggest thing. We had to get under the cap, number one, and we had to get rid of these big contracts that weren't impacting the team.
Agreed.
So I look at that, and this is why I think the move in getting rid of Von Miller in his contract would be beneficial for the Buffalo Bills, because if he's going to be the third person on the defensive line, I don't think you go with him, and I think you go with somebody younger that can make a bigger impact on the team. But other players, I mean, I'll throw out a surprise right here, Shawn, and I mean, I know that you'll probably disagree with me. Mike Edwards, I'm going to put him on roster bubble right now.
No, I'll disagree. I don't think any safety is set. I think I guess technically wrapped just because he has a 3-year deal.
Right.
But and I guess you can't say you're not going to cut a second round pick, but the rest of them they're all
Right.
up for even I can't remember his name. The safety we drafted, man. Cole Bishop. Yeah, obviously we're not gonna cut him, but he's still an open competition. So all the safeties are either not guaranteed a starting position or not guaranteed a roster spot. So I think that's Mike Edwards is a good pick.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this roster is full of a lot of depth as well as players that are unproven. And it's kind of a combination between depth players that have made, other teams' rosters and have been backups, as well as guys that just don't have any experience whatsoever in the NFL. And we're getting younger. I like that move for the Bills. I really do. But at what cost does it affect you when you have a guy that's been out there for, let's say, 7-8 years with the team, that maybe he could have made that play, but you decided not to re-sign him, and you decided to go with a younger guy that doesn't necessarily understand the playbook and doesn't have chemistry with all the other players around him as much as a guy like Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde. And you're sacrificing a little bit more for the roster. And that's what we're gonna have to figure out. So does Buffalo decide to go with a roster that's going to be young, or they decide to go with a roster that's going to be older? That's the thing that I wonder about a lot. But let me go with the comments real quick. I do have John Robert in here as well. He's had a few comments to that I want to get to. Number one, Vaughn can help Sullivan out. I completely agree with that. As well as I hear Klein is doing better than Smoot, which is what I've actually heard that as well, but I appreciate that comment too. I was surprised DeMar had grabbed an interception. Yeah, that surprised me a little bit, but DeMar has been playing pretty good football lately, and he's done a good job on special teams. But I think he's going to make an impact this year for the Buffalo Bills in some way, shape, or form. We have 2 Mike Edwards currently. One is on the offensive line. Yeah, that's kind of funny to think about.
I think
but we're talking about the
David
safety.
Edwards.
Well, there is another Mike Edwards as well. We signed some Mike
is?
Edwards. Yeah, about a week ago we signed him to the offensive line, which is kind of crazy. There's David Edwards, there's Mike Edwards, and then there's the other Mike Edwards. So 3 Edwards on the roster, which is kind of crazy. But I mean, it would be like having the Edmonds brothers. I mean, imagine that if you had all 3 Edmonds brothers on the roster.
Yeah,
it'd be good if you're triplets, and you can go to college and take each other's tests, which would be pretty cool. But when you're on an NFL roster, I don't know how that works. Maybe if you get mixed between the 3 of you, do you just trade positions for 1 play or 2 plays?
Right.
I mean, it'd be kind of funny to think about. I would like to see that. Let's say Tremaine and Terrell traded positions. I mean, if they're identical twins, how would you know?
True.
So, but Shawn, let's get into the main topic that we're going to talk about today. I did have a few topics in chat. Don't forget that if you want us to talk about something in particular, don't forget to put it in the comments as well. But Shawn, let's talk about the offense for the Buffalo Bills. We haven't talked about them a lot lately. We've kind of jumped into Josh Allen a lot over the past few shows, but this is the show that I want to get into this offense and talk about number one, the new faces on the offense that we're going to see. There's a lot of new faces, especially with the Bills not having familiar faces in Gabe Davis as well as Stephon Diggs. A lot of new faces that we're going to see, and this is kind of the main topic that we're going to talk about, because it kind of introduces us to the show that I'm going to do tomorrow on my channel, where we're going to talk about a player analysis of the Buffalo Bills, and we'll talk about one of these wide receivers. I won't say who, but we'll talk about one of the wide receivers that we're going to talk about. But let's go over the offense and talk about some of these players that are going to make a big impact for the Buffalo Bills. Let's talk about number one. Let's start it off with Keon Coleman, because not a lot of people know the offense of the Buffalo Bills and who is on the roster and who isn't. So let's get a little bit familiar with some of these players that we're going to talk about. You've seen in the offseason a lot of Keon Coleman hype and talk. So let's just go over a little bit with Keon Coleman and realistic expectations that we could see from him. So, Shawn, let's do a little quick player analysis. We'll go one by one with some of these players that we will talk about. Just give the folks a little bit of a view on Keon Coleman, where he played at, as well as what excites you about him.
Well, I guess what excites me about him is there's a lot of potential with him. Like we had my friend Cameron on a couple weeks ago, filling in for you when you were recovering. He was a wide receiver coach, played football, and he coaches or trains NFL, high school, athletes as well. And one thing he mentioned is all the things that he's lacking in, like the separation and maybe a little bit of footwork, speed, that could all be fixed. And you can use his big body to maybe force interference calls, because the DBs are going to have to be physical with him. So, things like that are ways he can win. And, he's got great hands, but, maybe right away he's not going to come out and be a 1,400-yard receiver with 10 touchdowns. But I think realistically for him this year, I think you could expect probably between like 500 and 700 yards and maybe 6 to 10 touchdowns, depending on how we use them. I mean, a lot of people think we're going to be using him in the red zone, but they forget Josh Allen likes to take it himself in the red zone. So not too sure, but I think he'll be a good possession receiver, third down maybe. they'll look to him a little bit. It's because of his size and physicality. But, he's got a lot of, being the first pick. Should have, technically he's our first round pick because we would have drafted him at 28 and 32. So I'll be looking at him as such. So I think he's got a little bit of high expectation, and a lot of our fan base is kind of unfairly, without knowing it, putting a lot of pressure on the kid.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we do. I mean, we put a lot of pressure on the guys, and I like your realistic expectations of 500 yards to 700 yards, somewhere in that range. We put so much expectations on these guys coming out of college, and we say 1,000 yards or 1,400 yards, and then they don't live up to the expectations, and then people in the chat get upset. They're like, oh, Coleman sucks. He's a bust. He's this, he's that. Or I'm not saying that Coleman is a bust whatsoever. I'm saying players like him are a bust because we have so much big expectation for these players and they don't work out. And is that on the players or is that on the fans? That's the one thing that you could really think about. I think that we just have big expectations for everybody because we expect them to come in and win us the Super Bowl, which is the goal that we always have. And your expectations, you kind of lowered it a little bit. And I respect that from you because, I said 1,000 yards easily. I'm thinking that in my head going, okay, look at the Bills offense. You could have 1,000 yards easily.
Yeah, you could.
But again, what does Buffalo do? Do they decide that he's going to be the number one wide receiver coming out of the gates, which I doubt that they will? I don't think they will. I think they're going to go with Curtis Samuel as well as Khalil Shakir as the 1-2, and they'll mix in Keon Coleman, and they'll mix in Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and they'll mix in other guys as well, and Chase Claypool that we'll talk about as well. But this is a roster that we're going to have to figure out. Is this the way that we see the Bills offense with Joe Brady and what we see the Bills spreading the ball around quite a bit? Or did we decide that we're going to add to that wide receiver room, which I don't think we're done adding to this wide receiver room whatsoever. I think that we're going to go with another wide receiver. I just have this feeling in my head that we're going to go with another wide receiver and bring somebody else in, another veteran as well. There's guys on the roster that are on the free agency ballot that we could go after. I'll throw a name out there that I would absolutely love, but I think his salary would be a little too high for the Bills. In Mike Thomas, I would absolutely love to see that because you talk about a player that has so much ability to get back to where he was before injuries. That's Mike Thomas by far. Injuries have hurt him a lot. Foot injuries as well as knee injuries have hurt him. But go back a few years, he had 149 catches. Dude can catch the ball. Dude played with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in Drew Brees. Always injured. That's the biggest thing that we're seeing with John Roberts say. I agree. But somebody that has high or low risk, high reward, if you take a flyer on him, you could go get somebody like that. I remember back a few years ago, this is within the last 10 years, we took a flyer on Sean Merriman. Didn't work out. Okay. We've taken risks on players quite a bit. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it does. But somebody that has so much ability to get back to the level that he once was at, I'll take a flyer on him every once in a while. Wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah. Why not?
But let's move on to another player. We talked about Keon Coleman a little bit. I don't want to get into these players too much, but let's go with Curtis Samuel. I'll talk about him a little bit. He's a little bit of a shifty kind of gadget guy type of player. Played with the Carolina Panthers as well as the Washington Commanders. And this is going to be our Swiss Army knife type player going across the middle of the field, kind of a little bit similar to what Khalil Shakir does, but he will be playing in the slot role as well as the Isaiah McKenzie role, moving around the line of scrimmage. He's going to probably be the motion guy that we will see a lot of from the Bills. And I imagine that they're going to put him in on special teams as well as on probably kickoffs or punt returns, one of the two, just because he gives you the ability to move the ball down the field. He's kind of that possession receiver that gives you yards after the catch, which is what I love about him. Realistic expectations for me, he had his best season with Joe Brady, and but injuries hurt him. I'm going to say in the 900 to 1,000 range, just because I think that the Bills are going to try and force feed him the ball quite a bit this season, which is where I think he'll be good at. But I say 900 to 1,000 yards for Curtis Samuel. I'm reading comments as well, so I'm getting sidetracked.
So, yeah, that'd be awesome if you could do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if he can do that, that's exactly where we see him at. But I'm going to go with all the wide receivers first, just because I want to get to them quickly. John Robert, I do see your comment here. What wide receivers do you think will make the roster? We currently have 13. After we get to know some of the players on the roster, I will get into that comment as well. So I won't forget about that. Obviously, you guys know Khalil Shakir. He's been on the roster for a few years, Boise State guy, kind of that Cole Beasley type. He has made a big impact in the playoffs, so we are going to skip him. Let's go with Marquez Valdez-Scantling, John. Let's talk about him a little bit. So I'll have you talk about him.
Well, he's played with the best, played with Rodgers and Mahomes and now with Josh. So he knows what it's like to play with winners and, great quarterbacks. But the only thing with me is he hasn't really put up gaudy numbers where you're like, wow, he's a barn burner elite type guy. He's a field stretcher. He's had drops in the past, but he'd come in and be like a wide receiver 5 or 4. Maybe he's above Matt Collins. I'm not too sure, but I think him being he's that another veteran guy like Samuel and Hollins, the leadership guy, might be able to make a couple plays here and there, but like I was trying to tell people last year when we got Hardy and Sherfield, everybody tried to make it like, oh, they're gonna get 500 to 700 yards and go crazy and help us win, and I was like, they're 4th and 5th, 6th guys for a reason. Like they're not going to be, putting up all this production. And I feel like, getting 300 to 500 yards from MVS would be, to be expected. That's kind of what he is. But we'll see. I'm not expecting.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I'm not expecting him to get a ton of playing time though. I think he'll make.
You never know. He could be a guy that gets a little bit of playing. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it just depends on what Buffalo decides to do. I mean, do they decide to go with a wide receiver group that's going to be older, or do they decide to throw Keon Coleman into the bus and say, let's ride with him? That's to be determined. Let's go with Chase Claypool, a guy that's kind of made an impact for himself. Somebody that had high expectations when he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Never really played out. He was very good when he was with Ben Roethlisberger in the first couple of years of his career. Then he had a little bit of quarterback change. Wasn't able to live up to the expectations that he had. He ended up going over to the Chicago Bears via trade, and he's somebody that has so much ability to be a superstar wide receiver in the NFL. We'll see what happens with him. Realistic expectations for me, I don't know if he makes the roster, to be honest with you. I mean, that's the biggest thing for me is I would love to see him make the roster. It's just a matter of, can he put the issues that he has off the field, not off the field, because he doesn't really have issues. It's more of mental issues that he has. Can he put those to bed and have the ability to just turn it on the field? That's what I want to see from him. So
yeah, we'll see
what happens. But realistic expectations, I say 200 to 300 yards, somewhere in that range for if he does make the roster. I don't think he's going to be on the field all that much, but he's a good blocker, number one. That's one thing I like about him a lot is he's a good blocker, and he has the ability to make this roster and make a big impact on it as well.
Yeah, honestly, I think he's he's like a key piece in how good we can be. So if like you said, like he just barely makes the roster, he only plays a little bit, gets like 200 yards. Obviously, it's not going to be like incredible production, but if he can be, just imagine if he can be what he was his first 2 years, like 1,000 total yards, 10 plus touchdowns, and he could do that. And then if Curtis Samuel can reproduce what he did for a couple years at his best, and then if Khalil Shakir can jump up to 1,000 yards, Kincaid can get 1,000 yards, then this offense might be like, wow, they actually were able to pull something off. But if like maybe Claypool doesn't do that, like where he could jump off for 70 catches for 800 yards and eight to 10 touchdowns. Now, I'm not saying that's a guarantee, but if because that talent is still there, he did that. Like it wasn't made up. He actually produced those for 2 years. You know what I mean? So if somehow he
Right.
could tap back into that, his attitude changed and he just becomes that old player that he was. And then you got guys like Shakir and Samuel and Kincaid, then it could be a pretty decent offense. But that's why I'm saying I think he's a key piece because if he just doesn't make the roster or he's just a blocker or maybe a catch every 2 games, we're not going to be as you know. I don't know. I just feel like 6'4", super fast. If he's producing, that's just another element to worry about. Then you got him, Coleman on the field at the same time. You got Shakir, you got Kincaid, you got Cook catching the ball. So like all these worries that we have, like we got a lot of unproven guys. I think it can really open
Right.
a lot of it can open a lot up, but that's just like best case scenario. I think yours is the realistic scenario, and mine is like the hope that he could do what he used to do. But that'd be really awesome if you could.
Yeah, you're right. John Roberts said coaches like Tyrell Shavers. I think they do, but I don't know. It's an uphill battle that everybody's going to have to make this roster. Real quick, I do want to
Yeah.
get to the comment saying Josh Allen is the best quarterback he has had, and he is willing to play special teams also. I would love to see that, but I think they're going to be cautious with him and not let him play special teams. But how funny would it be to see Josh Allen run a kickoff
No,
or
I,
punt return?
I think he was saying about Claypool
Yeah.
because
No, I
Claypool.
agree, but
Oh, you were
I'm
just
saying,
bringing up Josh Allen. Yeah, that'd be.
yeah,
He
I'm
probably
just
would
saying.
too.
I mean, if he did, I mean, the way that he runs, he reminds me so much of like Forrest Gump. If you ever watch Forrest Gump run, I'm telling you, it's Josh Allen. It's the
Yeah,
funniest thing you can possibly imagine to see.
agree.
So, Sean, another wide receiver. We added a lot of wide receivers this year. Matt Collins. I'll let you talk about Matt Collins real quick. He's somebody that played for the Las Vegas and Oakland Raiders. So let's
Yes.
talk about him a little bit.
Yeah, so Matt Collins is he's a great guy to have on your roster. He's the leader everywhere he goes, even if it's a 1 year team. He's always in a captain position. He's always firing people up and motivating guys. Just like a true leader that you like to have on your team. His best years, he had some pretty good ones in with the Raiders. And again, if a guy like Matt Collins can produce like he did in the Raiders, then that's another thing where you're like, man, like I wasn't expecting all these guys to work for the Bills. Everyone, because when you look at a room without anyone doing anything yet, it's a lot to like, man, these guys got a lot of work to do. But when you look at guys like Claypool and Matt Collins, they produced before. Sometimes they haven't, but if they can come to our team and do what they did in their best years, then you're like, man, this could change a lot. So he's going to make the team regardless because he's a great special teamer and a great leader. He's going to be a captain this year too. I can promise. I can guarantee that probably. But yeah, he's a good guy to have. Again, he doesn't jump out at you like, oh, he's an elite wide receiver, but he can do some damage. And again, this is all depending on how Joe Brady runs his offense. If he wants to
Right.
be, if he wants to be
No, I
running the ball
completely agree with you there.
50% of the time, then it'll be tough for all these guys to get stuff going.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, Sean. I mean, I think that this is a team that, it just depends on what they want to run. I think the biggest thing, number one, that Joe Brady has brought to the Buffalo Bills this season compared to last season is these bigger wide receivers that you are seeing. John Robert brings it up, 6'4", 238 pounds, 4'4", 240. Biggest thing I'm seeing is speed as well as size. Somebody that can catch the ball and make an impact on the field. But somebody that can also utilize yards after catch, which is something that Buffalo has struggled with the past few seasons. And that, I'm going to say it now, ever since Josh Allen came to the Buffalo Bills, we've struggled with yards after the catch. So I think the biggest thing is 50-50 balls, stuff like that. Red zone ability, bigger, stronger, physical guys that we're going to see. And this offense, I think, is going to be the focal points of this offense are going to be three players: James Cook, Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid. I'm going to throw it all out there and say that. Eventually, it's going to involve Keon Coleman as well. But I think this offense is going to be very good, especially when it comes to those three things, because you're going to be able to utilize play action a lot more. But if we can get Keon Coleman going early on in the season, another aspect that we will have in physical size in the red zone with guys like Coleman and Chase Claypool, even throwing it out there. But so you got Coleman, Chase Claypool, as well as Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's over 6'1", I believe. These are bigger guys that we can utilize, and we can also utilize the home run threat with speed with Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, and a few other guys too. So it's going to be fun to see.
I agree.
So I do want to bring up this comment real quick. Bills fan CA saying, just like Stacey Mom, the Bills wide receivers have got it going on. I love that we'll distribute the ball more, less me guys, and more team guys. People are going to be surprised. And I think that's the biggest thing is more team guys that are going to take a lot of pressure off of Josh Allen. I'm going to throw it out there right now and say this, Sean. I'm going to make a bold prediction right now. Josh Allen will have the best year of his career this season with this wide receiver group. I'm going to throw it out there right now and say that. Reason why? You don't have a diva wide receiver that is going to be impacting you and chirping in your ear, telling you that you need to throw him the ball 10 to 15 times a game in order to get him his 100 yards each and every week. You have guys that are going to make a big impact on this team by doing their job. This is a team that reminds me so much of what the Tampa Bay Rays have been able to utilize so much of. Utility players that are so good at what they do that help exceed the expectations of what they do on the field. That's what I'm seeing with the Buffalo Bills right now. And I'm going to throw it out there and say that this team is going to make big things happen with players that do not have high expectations, because you have not only Josh Allen around you, who's going to be a lot more calmer because he doesn't have these ego diva wide receivers that need the ball thrown this way. He also doesn't have his coaching staff telling him, hey, you need to throw it to Diggs. Hey, you need to throw it to this player or that player. You have guys that just are hungry and want the football whenever they get it, which is going to take so much pressure off of Josh. I think that he was stressed last year. I think that he was force-feeding the ball to Diggs. I think that he just wasn't himself. And that's why you saw Josh not making so many mistakes and throwing interceptions, because all you had to do is throw the ball to Diggs, throw it to Diggs, because that's what we had to do. And that's why you saw games where Gabe Davis wasn't involved. That's why you saw games where the Bills finally said, we're going to run the ball. We're not going to deal with what Stefan's saying. I think that's why this team is going to be so good, is because Josh is going to have the ability to be free and play the way that he wants to play whenever he wants to play it. So spread the ball around, throw it to whoever he wants, and make plays. That's Josh Allen football. Josh plays his best when you throw the ball to 11, 12 players on the team. You know, it could be 7 wide receivers, 4 running backs, and, a cheerleader on the sidelines. When Josh does that, he plays his best. I'm sorry to say it, but that's the team that we need to play, and that's how we need to be. Let Josh be Josh. That's what it's going to take.
Yes, sir.
So, I do want to give a couple comments as well. John Roberts saying Josh Allen says Keon likes to talk. Yes, he does. But also, Keon Coleman is a guy that he's very intelligent in what he says. And he is somebody that wants to play for a team. He's somebody that's not a me guy. He's more of a we guy. That's what we need on the Buffalo Bills. Bills fan CA, love the hot take. Appreciate it. John Robert coming out saying Keon worked out with his cousin, CeeDee Lamb. That's the other thing is, the traits that you're going to have with a guy like CeeDee Lamb. If you can be 99% of what CeeDee Lamb is, I'll take it for the Buffalo Bills. So, Sean, let's talk about the comment from John Robert that came in earlier asking, what 6 wide receivers do you think will make the roster, or what wide receivers do you think will make the 53-man roster for the Buffalo Bills? We'll stick with one position group, but we'll switch it up each show and talk about a little bit more of the position groups to get to know the players on the roster. But let's talk about the wide receivers that you think will make the roster for the Buffalo Bills. Give your predictions.
Well, Keon Coleman, obviously. Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Mac Hollins, MVS, Claypool, and I think there's a guy I'm forgetting.
So, real quick, I want to throw out the guys that are on the roster right now for the wide receiver group. That way, everybody knows. You got Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir are the projected 3 starting wide receivers for the Buffalo Bills. Backups are Marquez Scantling, who came over from Kansas City. Chase Claypool came over from the Chicago Bears. Mac Hollins, who came over from the Atlanta Falcons. KJ Hamler, Andy Isabella, and Justin Shorter have been on the roster for a little bit. KJ Hamler came over from Denver Broncos, but has been on the roster for a little bit of time. Then you add in the younger wide receivers and Brian Thompson, as well as Xavier Johnson, who played for Ohio State last year, and Tyrell Shavers. I'm trying to see if there's any more that I'm forgetting, but I believe that's all the wide receivers on the roster right now. So,
yeah, well, if it's 6, it's the 6 I mentioned. If it's 7, it'll be Coleman, Shakir, Samuel, Hollins, MVS, Claypool, and Shavers, if there's 7.
So I'm going to go bold, and I'm going to say Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir make the roster. Here's where I think it gets a little dicey, okay? You have Mac Hollins, who I think is absolutely going to make the roster. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who I believe, again, will make the roster. Chase Claypool is in a battle right now for the 6th spot. If he doesn't work out, you got Justin Shorter, you got KJ Hamler, as well as Andy Isabella to make the roster. I don't know right now if the Buffalo Bills are going to make this the deciding factor for the team. As far as, these players, I think that there's going to be a move that they're going to make and add to that wide receiver room. I honestly do. I don't think they're done. I think that if Chase Claypool struggles in training camp, the Bills will make another move. They need another veteran wide receiver, in my opinion. I strongly believe that. And we'll see what happens, too. So, easier to say MVS. I completely agree. I just, like to say the full name. That way everybody understands, because if I say MVS, there could be somebody that's watching the show, depending on who it is. Maybe they don't understand who MVS is. So, it's just better to say the full name. That way you can look him up, and you might go on Wikipedia or wherever to look up that player and find out who it is. So that's what it takes. But Shawn, that's the wide receiver room. I mean, I'm looking at that. The 5 we mentioned. Justin Shorter, tough battle as well. We'll see what happens too.
Yeah. Yep. Possible.
So Shawn, we're at about the hour mark right now. I do want to open it up to you as well as the channel. Talk about some other topics. Is there anything that you would want to talk about? Number one.
I guess I've been thinking, because a lot of people have been talking about it. I don't really want Micah Hyde to come back. Again, love him, love what he did for us, love the player he is. But if we're gonna really start the youth movement, I'd rather just if he wants to come back to football, why not just be like a part of the coaching staff? Why take a roster spot, whether it's from a safety room or from another position? Because if we want to keep Micah Hyde, they might say, "Oh, you know what? Well, we don't want to get rid of any of the other safeties. Let's get rid of an extra receiver, and then we cut Claypool or Shavers or MVS or for example, um, just like Poyer, Hyde showed his ass a little bit last year. Um, I feel like he still ended on a good note, and I wanted to keep it that way. If he comes back next
Yeah.
year and he plays horrible because he's even slower and weaker and worse, I'm just gonna hate watching that and be pissed off at him all the time. When we could have younger guys like
Right.
Bishop and Taylor Rapp, and I mean, people forget, but before DeMar Hamlin had a heart attack, he wasn't a bad safety. Like he was actually, he was getting close to 100 tackles that year. Um, but yeah, like John said, Micah's health is way more important, and we've seen it over the years. Missing a ton of time, basically missed the whole season one year because of his neck injuries, and it's just he's a young man. He's still physically fit, and he's got beautiful kids and a family.
Yeah.
Sure, it'd be nice to have him back, but I just feel like you can still be impactful in like a coaching role, like an assistant safeties coach, or because you're still around football. If you get that itch to be around football,
Yep.
you can coach, you can be safer, and like I said, I just think if we're gonna go the youth movement, let's just do it.
Yeah.
Don't get rid of one and bring the other one back, and then you're taking a spot and playing time away from a younger guy that's supposed to be the future. Like I said, Taylor Rapp signed a 3-year deal. Cole Bishop's here for 4 years. I think Demar's got a year left, and Mike Edwards is that vet that we have now. So
Right.
I think we're fine there. I think a lot of people just want Hyde back just because he's Micah Hyde. But
Yeah.
I just feel like there's more reasons for him to just either retire or be in a coaching role. So that's all I want to say about that. Again, I'm not gonna oh man, I hate Micah Hyde if we sign him again. I just feel like it's better just if he was willing to be in a coaching role. I think that would be actually really cool because then he's strictly just mentoring. He's not taking up a roster spot, and
Right.
he's helping guys like, even though Taylor won a Super Bowl, he was a starter, but guys like Bishop and then Taylor Rapp trying to get used to being the main focal point of that secondary. Where because last year Rapp didn't do too hot in my opinion, but I feel like he didn't get enough playing time to settle in. He was always like jumping in for a few plays here and there, and then like coming in garbage time, and didn't really get a feel for the whole system. So I think once he plays, he's a starter 100%. I think he'll play better. So it'll be interesting, but I think Hyde should have stayed retired.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and that's a difficult position because we don't have a lot of players that are veterans that have the experience of Micah Hyde on our roster right now. But I mean, I understand the youth movement that we're kind of going with. It's time for guys like Taron Johnson to step up, and it's time for other guys that to be vocal leaders that are a little bit younger. Maybe guys like Connor McGovern on the offensive line, or even a David Edwards or somebody like that, to be a veteran and be a captain. So very understandable. I get it. And, the injuries do play a big impact, especially when you have a family. That's the one thing that I would say, unless you're Tom Brady and you don't necessarily care about your family and what they think, maybe you decide to keep playing football. But Micah has a beautiful family, and that's where it stands. Is he has to make a decision whether to keep playing football and risk injuries, and not being able to pick up your kid whatsoever, or retire, and that's where he stands. So I think he's going to make the smart decision, and I call it quits. But as Josh said, one more year. We'll see what happens. So options are on the table. Speaking of Josh Allen, I did want to get to this the last show that we did. We didn't talk about it. Jared Goff recently signed a new contract, making him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Something that we can think about, but Josh Allen's contract, around $45, $46 million a year that he is signing with. That contract, starting to look better and better every time a new quarterback signs a contract. But do you think could be time for Josh to renew his contract and make him one of the highest paid quarterbacks again? Do you think that the Bills should make a decision soon to re-sign Josh Allen and give him an extension?
No, I don't think so. They're just finally starting to eat his money, and you can't just keep pushing it down and delaying the inevitable. It's better to start eating some of the money, because then at the end of the day, then when we do re-sign him, we'll be able to do other things if we could eat some of the money now instead of just pushing it down the road. But maybe in like a couple years, because I think he's still got a few good years left on the deal. So in a couple years, go back to the table.
Yeah. I mean, you look at his contract right now. He's currently 28 years old, 27, 28 years old. Actually, he just had a birthday, so 28 years old. So he's currently sitting around a cap hit of about $35 million, somewhere in that range. So he will be an unrestricted free agent in 2029. So that'll be age 33 when he does have that contract that will expire. Now the Bills can push a little bit of money, give him like a 2-year, let's say $60 million contract extension, where you can move some money around a little bit and maneuver the salary cap. Obviously, I think he deserves more than that. I think he's going to get like a 2-year, $100 million contract in that range. But you could sign him to an extension where you can move a little bit of money, but he may take a player-friendly deal for the Buffalo Bills to extend a couple of years to that contract, making him over $300 million in his contract. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
But other topics that we can talk about too, I wanted to get to, Sean. This is something that has kind of not really been talked about with this offense, and I wanted your opinion. You look at the Bills roster right now as far as the running back room. Do you think that the Bills are done adding to that running back room with James Cook? You got in there Ray Davis, a rookie as well. Ty Johnson, who played last year with the Buffalo Bills, and Darrington Evans on that team as well. Then you have Frank Gore Jr. to add to that room, another rookie that we did get as an unrestricted free agent. Do you think that the Bills are going to add to that running back room?
It's hard to say now. I know we got 2 for sure. I think they like Ty Johnson, and Ty Johnson's pretty decent. But maybe if the price was right and they could find a number 3 who's a little bit better than Ty Johnson, I could see that. But I'm not certain that they'll do that.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it lately, and I'm like, that's a position I would like to see them add to, but we'll see though what happens.
Right.
All right, Shawn, we're at about the hour and 5-minute mark. Any closing thoughts from you for the Bills?
Yeah, well, it's going to be a interesting year. Guys got a lot to prove. I'm not going to, like I said in my prediction show, it's not that I don't think we can win more than 10 games, but they got to show me that they can all buy into this new offense and that it's actually going to work and be sustainable. And, these guys that aren't, elite of the elite be able to win consistently and get open and, make this offense, work really well. Because if the offense doesn't work really well, the defense probably won't work really well, and then it'll be some difficult times. So, obviously we still got some talent. A lot of guys that if they can prove to be who we all think they could be, this offense could be very good. But until they do it, it's just a lot of questions. So, but that's I think that's what makes this year going to be really fun. Is sky's the limit, or it could be really bad. So
Yeah.
I like that just because it all depends on them. It all depends on how hard they work. It all depends on if Joe Brady put in a lot of time this offseason actually working on this offense, and if these weapons can actually produce. Because hey, it'll be awesome. It'll be easy if you get Curtis Samuel's best year of production, Claypool's best year of production, Shakir and Kincaid both get 1,000 yards, and so on and so forth. That'll all be great, but they got to be able to prove that they can do it. So,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, pretty excited and glad we got to get back on the shows and I guess keep a lookout for tomorrow because it'll be June 2nd and we can maybe sign someone.
Right.
I got some people maybe in my mind, but I guess I also think we're just probably going to keep the money and stay put, but maybe get a corner or maybe another edge rusher for competition or maybe another safety or maybe another guard. But that'd be really interesting to see what we do.
Yeah, you also have to remember injuries as well. Injuries happen. It's happened last year. We had to sign a few guys off the street, and we'll see what happens. But, about $13 million, I believe, that we have right now. So starting tomorrow. So we'll see what happens, though. It's going to be interesting. But if you're new to our channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment on the Nickel City Mafia, as well as Shawn's channel, Red, White, and Bills. And I'm sorry, Red, White, and Bills. I'm drawing a blank now. As well as Go Bills podcast. I will be live tomorrow starting at 8 p.m. for a player analysis. That'll be a video depth analysis of a certain player on the Bills offensive side of the ball. And we will talk about that as well. I also have a special announcement that I will be making on an upcoming show in the next few weeks. That'll be interesting to see what happens there, but it's going to be an interesting announcement that we will talk about as well. We do have a comment that came in real quick. Last comment that we will talk about from John Roberts saying, do you think the Bills will keep any undrafted free agents on the Bills roster this season? Shawn, I'll let you start off this one.
Start at the 53? No, but practice squad, probably a couple.
I think one that could is Frank Gore Jr.
Yeah.
I'll throw it out there. That's the one that I think could. Joe Andreessen, who was a recent pickup from the Buffalo Bills as a linebacker. That's another position that I think that with the depth and everything that he could make the roster, but it's going to be tough. We'll see what happens there. But overall, I just don't think that there's a lot of players that are undrafted free agents that are going to make this roster. Another position I can throw out there, punter. I'm just throwing it out there. If Sam Martin's hurt, we just released Mac Hack from the roster. If Sam Martin doesn't live up to expectations again in the training camp, it could be a move that the Bills make and keep an undrafted free agent as well. So we'll see what happens. But Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on all social media platforms. You can find the Nickel City Mafia on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as on my channel. You can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, along with a lot of other channels as well. But also don't forget to click on over to the website, gobillspodcast.com, where you can find all of the upcoming shows for myself, along with Shawn of the Red, White, and Bills and Nickel City Mafia as well. This has been the Red, White, and Ruthless. We will see you next time for another edition of the show, live Saturdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, go Bills.
Go Bills.